Good evening. Welcome to the sixth and final program of our 32nd season of the 2024 Asbro Forum Speaker Series. I'm Gail Jackson, and the moderator of today's program. As is customary, we will hear from our speaker for about 30 minutes and then have time for the Q&A at the end. And now for tonight's program, we are featuring a really world-renowned photographer and summer resident, Jonathan Becker, who, among other positions, has been a photographer for Vanity Fair for over 30 years. Other magazines as well, but that's his most prominent association. He has spent hours with some of the world's best-known celebrities and leaders in politics, the arts, public service, sports, and countless other areas. We are hoping he will tell what this experience has been like. And shall we pledge that what he reveals won't go beyond this room? I will ask John Rexwaller to do the introduction and coax as much as he can out of Jonathan. So John, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Gail. Thank you. Also, just a reminder to shut off your cell phones before we start, so we don't get beeps in the middle of great stories. We're thrilled to welcome Jonathan, our summer resident, Jonathan Becker, to the forum. Over the course of 5 decades, Jonathan has produced a body of photographic work that documents the lives of prominent 20th century movie stars and novelty and royalty, amongst others, maybe novelty as well. A protege of the legendary Parisian photographer Brassai and longtime contributor to Vanity Fair, as Gail has mentioned, Jonathan's work provides a link between fine art photography and the photographer as a social observer. His new book, Lost Time, which is, you'll see the cover on here with that magnificent photograph up there. His new book, Lost Time, is a collection of commissioned and personal work from across his career in New York, Paris, London, Buenos Aires, from the 1970s to the 2010s. It also includes a narrative text by Jonathan about his life, travels, and encounters with some of the most well-known figures of the 20th century. Note that his early work is, particularly some of the photographs taken at Elaine's in New York, were done with his prized Rolleiflex camera when he was in his early 20s and maybe before. We're very fortunate to have Jonathan here to give us some captions and backstories to some of his photographs that his publishers would probably not have permitted to be published in the book. His presentation will be fast-paced as he has selected quite a few of his photographs to share with us. So I'm just here to rein him in when those stories may start to get really, really interesting. So with that, I'm just going to hand it over to John. Jonathan, he'll do a short introduction, and then we'll get on and take a look at some of his magnificent photographs.
The book, it's about the book. So the book started 15 years ago when I wanted to make a book of collected work, and I didn't know how to do it. And the agent, Andrew Wiley, said, Mark Holborn, you see Mark Holborn. So I was working a lot in England over there, so I found him down in Sussex, and I liked him, and arranged for him to come to New York and collaborate with me for a few days. He was going to come he came on a Sunday. He was staying till a Thursday. We were going to work for 3 days. I had 500 pictures to go over. And the next day, I got a call from London. Excuse me. I had to go to photograph. They had a project for Tatler magazine. They wanted to photograph all 24 Dukes for their 100th anniversary. And I didn't think it was possible, so I forgot about it. But it was all arranged. Just on the day, whenever it happened, I had to be there. So I left. And I came back 24 hours later, did the picture. And I left on a Monday night, came back on a late Tuesday night, and Wednesday I called Mark. He was staying right down the street from my studio on the river. It was very nice. He was happy there, and he's sort of sybaritic guy. We'd like to have fancy dinners, and he said he wasn't done yet. And I said, well, what do you mean? What about me? I was going to help with the book. He said, well, I'll call you later. Well, he did. He stayed all day. And that night we went out for a dinner, and he handed me this series of pictures, edited, 300 of them. And I thought, well, this is not good, because I had nothing to do with it. And then he left the next morning, and I looked at what he'd done, and it was quite beautiful. It was a visual narrative. There were no chapters. All the pictures were the same size, and it was quite satisfying at the end. So no one wanted to publish it that way. And the agent, Andrew Wiley, kept saying to note everybody who wanted to make chapters and portrait sections and this. So it had to be done this way, and I agreed. So I just put it away for 15 years and made other books that people wanted more. Vanity Fair book, this, that, and the other thing. But people have been very important to me all along. You know, Brassai was my great hero. Mark Holborn was very taken with him, and I'd given him a book about Brassai that Brassai had written about his hero, Proust. And so that's how the title of the book came along, from Lost Time, In Search of Lost Time. And then when I was very young, I got to be very good friends with Elaine of the restaurant. I just lived there. Whitney Tower used to take me up there. And we met all these people in a great time, and I think we can start the pictures. Yeah. This is Brassai. He's my great hero, because I wasn't going to college, and I didn't know what to do with myself one summer. I was driving west in a Volkswagen. My father was very academic and disapproving of everything, and I wanted to get away from this. He was, he'd skipped 2 years in school and was a Harvard Rhodes Scholar, like our friend erudite, and he just couldn't fathom that I wasn't so interested in school. But then I ran out of everything in Colorado, and I drove back to Harvard, where they had a summer school, which was safe. And I chose a course there in surrealism, which kind of fascinated me. But it was a postgraduate course, and it was taught in French, and they admitted me somehow. The professor was very interesting, and somehow I talked my way into it. And that took care of this summer, and then in the fall, I still didn't know what to do with myself. So I told my father that I would be writing a thesis. He knew about theses, and for my course at Harvard. It's a serious course, and I would be out in Southampton to write it, by myself. So I did this, and I think it was about 9 pages long when I finished, but I really did work on it. And I sent it to the professor in February, I think. And he wrote me back saying that I'd flunked because it was due in August or September. And he didn't know, and it was supposed to be in French, and I'd written it in English. But that he was an acquaintance of Brassai, and he had his address, and maybe it would amuse him. So I sent it to him, and I got this letter back. It was like a saving grace. It said that it had given a great satisfaction to Brassai. And he said, you've understood and expressed the spirit in which I photographed. So this was really, I thought, well, I could die now. I'd done something. I couldn't believe it. And I showed it to my father, and he was impressed. So he found me a room in Paris. He was a film distributor. He had a very nice 6th floor walk-up maid's room. And there I then began 10 years of friendship and mentorship with Brassai. And then, so that's Brassai. The day I met him in Paris, he took me out to lunch. in 1974. Let's move the pictures, right? Oh, so this was at Elaine's in the kitchen. I, I used to take people into the kitchen because there was light there to photograph them. It was a messy kitchen. The food there, you know, wasn't what you went for, and it was fun. It was the people, and so I could take people in the kitchen. This was their first year of the Saturday Night Live. Now it's their 50th year. But it was an improvised studio, and it worked. Okay, the next picture. Andy was like I don't know, he was a catalyst to everything in New York in those days. And I don't know, he was very shy, really, and so was Elaine. And I thought they looked. Next picture. Oh, that was, I took that in Paris. That's Kenny Lane on his honeymoon with a beautiful Nikki Weymouth. But it was very late at night. It was 2 in the morning. And that's Elaine, just over his right shoulder there. She was being the chaperone or something. They didn't want to go into the, or Kenny didn't want to, you know, go to bed. So it was getting very late, and I think it was around 1 in the morning, something like. Anyway, it was quite beautiful. I thought they didn't stay married. Okay, the next one. Oh, this was an early picture. I did it for W magazine. W was a great place. Oh, the story was that I picked her up. I knew her grandchildren, Nikki, and I knew her son, Frecky, who'd been working at the embassy in Paris, and her other son, Tim, was an architect. But I was a taxi driver in New York in these years, 78. Still not going to college. And so I picked her up. She was coming out of the Beekman Theater, and she'd been to see a movie called L'Innocente by Visconti, and I actually knew from Paris the actors in it. And so she and Rudy Crespi, Count Rudy Crespi, I picked them up in the Checker and drove her a short distance home to Park Avenue, and just dropped all these names about her children and the people in the movie, and Mark Perel, the actor who'd appeared, I knew in full frontal nudity in the movie. And I dropped her off, and then I dropped Rudy Crespi off, and that was that. And I thought she must have thought I was some kind of a nutty cab driver. And then I got this assignment a few months later. I was working at W magazine. I'd photograph events and parties for them. I'd park the cab, run up and photograph Jackie Kennedy and the rest, and then get back in the cab and keep driving. Because it was steadier, the taxi driving. Anyway, so then I knock on her door to photograph her for W magazine, and there was Andre Leon Talley, the big fashion editor. He became a big deal, a big 6'5", and he weighed tons. But he was a wonderful fella, and he shrieked when I introduced myself back to her. I said, "Hi, I'm the taxi driver." He shrieked and said, "What? They said a taxi driver?" But it turned out very well. Anyway, we better go to the next picture, right? Well, I put this in the book. This always impressed me. This was at the Arts and Letters uptown, the award ceremony, and you know the look in her eyes of admiration and so forth of Bernard Malamud, who was a big deal, a real intellectual. I thought, you know, how times have changed. You know, the status has changed now. I mean, anyway, next picture. There was a Brassai at Ez, in his, where he had an exotic garden there, way up on the top high over just east of Nice. He had a wonderful place up there. So the next picture, there he is up there. Yeah, it was magical time. I used to go and visit him down there. Also, I'd been very poor in Paris, and by this time I was working, and the franc had gone up to 10. 10 francs a dollar. It had been 4 francs a dollar. So I was really living high, and we had a great time. The next. Well, this is sadder. This is a little later. This is Brassai was a noctambulist. You know, his famous book was Paris by Night, and he loved walking at night. And sadly, he was really he had ticker problems, and he went to the hospital the next day, and that was the end. Well, this is Patricia Neal, but I didn't know this when I took the picture. It was down at the Reagan inaugural with the Jockey Club in Washington, and she reminded me so much of a Brassai picture, the Le Monde Bijou. There was always with all these jewelries and things, and something about the sadness in her face. And I realized after that she's the great actress, a truly great actress, Patricia Neal, one of the greatest of all time. Next picture. Well, this one is more personal because Martha Graham was my godmother. My mother's a dancer and a choreographer. And she was when I was little, my parents met in Paris when she was when my mother was performing at a rehearsal. My father I guess he was at Oxford, and he'd come over to see, he was a critic too, a drama critic, so he'd come to see things, and he saw my mother on the stage and introduced himself backstage, I think. And at any rate, she was a big part of my early life. I spent in a baby carriage. I used to sit, I was parked with the dog while my mother danced at the Graham studio. But she was she was quite kind and loving, and I'd get in trouble, and she'd say, "Oh, not to worry, he's searching. Everything was about searching." And I'd return the stolen car or something, At any rate, I thought this would be an easy picture to take. I had an assignment to photograph her, but I couldn't reach her. And this fellow would answer the phone. He was keeping her sequestered because she was alcoholic, and he didn't want her drinking and seeing anybody. And finally, I got through, and she said, "Meet me backstage at the city center after the last performance." And I did, but then I thought maybe I could photograph her in the dressing room or something. But they put me behind a rope with a phalanx of photographers. I didn't know how this would come about, that I could get this picture. But I put the slightly longer lens than I usually use, and she scanned the photographers and found me. And then she started to pose. And I thought, this is just miraculous. No one else is here. It's just the two of us. This was better than anything. I mean, she was a genius. So the next one. This I did for Vogue. Lauren Davis was her name, and she was engaged to the Santo Domingos, who sort of owned Colombia, the country. And she was very happy, and I think Alexandra Couture was my editor, and she was always having people jump up on things anyway. But it's just the gall, with the priceless Picassos, and I thought it was a wonderful picture. She doesn't like it because the in-laws got upset. Okay, next. Oh, this was a great subject. She's a magnificent lady, Mrs. Wildenstein. She actually walked in that way she'd been walking the dogs in their Chanel. And I said, this is perfect, let's just do that. She was famous for having made herself look like a cat. And she loved animals, and she had a zoo in Kenya. And she had just had this, it was this bit of a scandal going on, because her husband, she'd come home to find her husband in bed with a Russian prostitute. And she scared him, and he reached in the bed table drawer and pulled a pistol out and pointed it at her. She picked up the phone and called the police and had him arrested. And I just, and that was, she's quite a character. Okay, next one. Well, these I put the two together because, there's a reason that I had to photograph him many times. He's a New Yorker and whatnot. But this one I think is 2005. That one's 2015. And so what's interesting is I wasn't prepared to like Al Sharpton. He had a bad reputation with the Tawana Brawley business and everything. He was a rabble-rouser, and I thought, oh, this is going to be peculiar. But he was completely different than I expected. He was all skinny. He used to be enormous, and he was eating macrobiotic food, and he was actually very quiet and soft-spoken. And we started talking, and I said, by and by, I said, well, what happens with you? Think of Donald Trump is the candidate? Because he had a reputation anyway. And he said, and this Sharpton says to me, he said, you don't understand. You don't understand anything. And he said, Donald. He said, you can't possibly understand. You don't know him. He said, the Don and me, we're the same. We're both cartoon characters. I thought, wow, that's very interesting. Anyway, okay, next. Oh, this is a great subject, Dr. Kevorkian. Well, I wrote something that I'm supposed to say about him. I photographed him a couple times. I had two. I spent in Detroit. It had become Murder City because it was a murder capital at that point. There was a lot of deaths going on there. And he was in the middle of it, and his best friend was the chief medical examiner, whom he advised me to go down and meet because he could explain things. I knew some things about him. He had strange proclivities. He was as a young doctor, he'd proposed draining the blood from corpses on battlefields, things that just don't work. And then he proposed vivisecting, making live autopsies of inmates condemned to death. And then he always spent an extra strange few hours in the van after his patients had concluded that the assisted suicide, but I liked him. He was enthusiastic, and I got along well with him. I'm not judgmental, and then one day he said, "Well, come and see my paintings," to his house, and no one had seen these things, and I thought, why he really revealed himself as a necrophiliac. I mean, and so this ran, full color, double page in the magazine, and we really made a great, because he was a big deal at the time. I mean, I still like him because I think he had strange, he was strange, but he tried to turn things to advantage. I mean, he tried to help people. I felt he was not a bad guy. Anyway. Okay, the next one. Oh. This was a long time ago. This was in the 80s, at the time of Al Gore's first presidential campaign. and his whole family was around there in Tennessee. And I always felt his father was unbelievably present everywhere, and he's a fierce fella. And I always felt that it was the father that wanted him to be president, and he was a driving character. And then when he lost to President Bush that night, it wasn't surprising to me that he took his jacket off and was dancing in a nightclub and sweating in his shirt, and he was happy as it could be. I think he was free of his father's whole thing, but it's just psychological, amateur observation. So here I used to do portraits I felt they were portraits anyway, because at the Vanity Fair parties, and somehow I they weren't snapshots. I felt they were moments that were important. I got good at this. I had a special lighting gadget. Next one. Oh, this is the Billy Wilders at the Vanity Fair, one of the Vanity Fair events. I mean, he's one of the great filmmakers of all time, right? I mean, he's as accomplished as any human being could be. Yeah, I mean, he wrote Sunset Boulevard, Double Indemnity, Some Like It Hot, and but he'd been a great writer when he was as a youth in his native Austria and Germany before the war. And his tombstone reads, "I'm a writer, but nobody's perfect." And then nearby, Audrey's tomb, I know this because I was sent on assignment to photograph a graveyard in Hollywood. And then next to it nearby is Audrey's bench. It's out of cut of the same marble. And on the bench it reads, "I'm right here, Billy." George Stevens probably could talk more about him. Next. This is another sort of what I feel is a portrait down in another one of these events in Tribeca. At the left, that's Olat's Schnabel, the ex-wife of Julian the painter, and David Bowie. All right, keep going. This was at the. I like this picture. He was kind of controlling Tom Cruise. A very nice guy, but I think he was upset with her. Debauchery. He doesn't. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. This is the 18th Duchess of Alba. One of the most. She has more titles than anyone on the planet. I mean, the list goes a page long. I mean, she was known to have land that you could walk from one side of Spain to the other without leaving her property. This was in Seville. She was notoriously ugly. She had a bad face that just was like that, but she didn't seem to care. Very flirtatious. She had many, many boyfriends. And she was fun. And so Goya had photographed the 13th Duchess of Alba, painted many times, and they were rumored to be linked. And there were two famous portraits, the Black Duchess and the White Duchess. He kept the Black Duchess for himself. And she was rumored to be the 13th one, the subject of La Maja Desnuda. That's a painting of a lady lying on a sofa like that in the nude. And so I say, but he also painted another one with La Maja lying down on the same sofa, dressed. And they both hung. They hung at the Royal Academy in Madrid, for years, where Goya was the administrator, and where I had a show. When this picture hung, I was very honored because the Goyas, there were a lot of Goyas in the back, and that was good. But she said, I said, well, why don't we do La Maja? Because it was, and she, you know, and she said, well, I won't do it. I'm not doing it in the nude. But she did this, and it was fun. I think she was a good game subject. Okay, the next one. Oh, this is a fellow named Puccio Pucci, who lived in the Palazzo Pucci on the Via de Pucci in Florence. And I went to do a story that wasn't so interesting about Emilio Pucci, his brother. Emilio Pucci was dead, and the story was all with mannequins and clothes and a very excited fashion editor. And I got kind of bored, and I go down to the out front of the palace to have a puff, and then I meet this fella, and who had nothing to do with anything, except that he was the brother, and we struck a friendship, and I went up and he made this portrait, and that opened the story. It had nothing. I mean, these things that have nothing to do with assignments are much more interesting than the assignments sometimes. Okay, the next one. Oh. This was not an assignment. This was a commission. The then Prince of Wales wanted for his people to be more comfortable with his relation with Camilla, because it'd been awkward. And this was the first time that he was entertaining with her at Buckingham Palace. That table's like hundreds of feet long. It's incredible. And he commissioned me. He said, I wanted to do this. There were 3 days of events that he was doing for his philanthropy, and this was the goal. And then they published this everywhere. Vanity Fair ran a big story. It was on the cover of Hello and Ola and both. It was good. Anyway, it was good. That was good. This is later on. This is up at Highgrove. And he was going. This was for Vanity Fair. I was going to do a portrait of him, and he was walking like that, and he turned around to pose for the portrait. I said, "No, this is better. Just keep walking." Okay. Oh, this is Andre that I'd met. This is much later. Andre, who the editor with whom I photographed Dan of Vreeland in 1978. Much later. This was done in 2000 something, 10 or 14, I can't remember. And he had a nobility about him by this time. And he was a great fashion editor. It was very good to me. He gave me my first museum exhibition down in Savannah, and where he had a falling out with the editor, Anna Wintour, and he went down and ran the fashion department of the Savannah College of Art and Design, and as she did for the Metropolitan, and this was done for a story in Vanity Fair. It was different. The one that he published, he was all happy and laughing and gay and whatnot. He liked this picture better because he wasn't feeling so good. Okay. Oh. This is Peter Beard's feet, which I did a lot of pictures with him, and I'd been in Africa with at his place there. I liked him. He was a Buckley boy, and then but the feet just looked elephantine to me. The details are important, I think. Okay. Well, this picture, which is on the cover of the book, because I didn't want to put a person on the cover, and it's complicated. But this is at the Eden Rock in in Cap d'Antibes, and you know, I'd been down to the south of France a lot, but on the other side of Nice. This is west of Nice. This was, and when I was a kid, I read Fitzgerald like crazy. I loved Fitzgerald. I was entranced, and there's something about the. This was right. This is right there. I think it's still there at the Eden Rock. I wondered if it hadn't been there, you know, in Fitzgerald's day. It looked like it might have been, but there's something about the foreboding and the you know, there's gaiety, but then foreboding and doom and tragedy that was Fitzgerald was so full of. I don't know, but that's what it did to me. Next. Oh, more doom and gloom. I'm sorry. This is Hemingway's front door in Kitchum, Idaho. And so he opened the door, and that's where is the foyer of the house where he blew his head off. So I just thought that was it had. I think the attention I paid to this graphic had to do with the knowledge of that. Anyway, next. Oh, yeah, more gloom. This was a picture that Mapplethorpe was having. Robert Mapplethorpe was having his retrospective at the Whitney, and he was sick. And AIDS had cast this great pall and over New York, and it was the elephant in the room at the opening. And I had a keenness to photograph to get that. He didn't like this picture very much. He thought it offended his vanity. He wanted one of his elegant self-portraits to run in the magazine. But it really was impressive when it ran, because, and he said, quoted saying it's horrible. It's like Diane Arbus. Well, I thought, well, that's not so bad. And it was, oh God, we just on all the gloomiest pictures. How did this happen? Really? Must be you. William Styron, you know, the great William Styron, he wrote the Confessions of Nat Turner, the Pulitzer Prize, Sophie's Choice, but he was afflicted with manic depression, really afflicted. And he had just written a book called Darkness Visible, which was about this, a short, brilliant book. It was very helpful to people who had this problem. And so I went up, and he was with his friend Art Buchwald. He invited me to go for a walk with him, and they talked about all different matters of suicide and how this happens and I thought it was horrible. I fell back. I couldn't listen to it anymore. They said, we do this every day. It makes us feel better. And but the picture came. I mean, I didn't do this. It was magical the way it happened, and all these kind of symbolic things, the still water and the rope, and the black dog was what Churchill called his depression. And next one. This is a good picture. She's wonderful, Eudora Welty. And I went down. I was invited to go to Jackson. I wrote something about her, so don't forget. Wait. Oh, yeah, she was very quiet and reserved. She lived and was born. She born, lived, and died in the same house in Jackson, and a spinster all her life. And she unbelievably prolific writer, also Pulitzer Prize for the Optimist's Daughter, and but she prolific. Her writings are beautiful and sensitive, and she was a great photographer. Also used a Rolleiflex, and she worked for the WPA, the Works Project Administration, and did a document of all different strata of society, and mostly the black society in Mississippi. And I was invited to go down here. George Plimpton was doing an interview for NPR, And so I went along, and yeah, I don't know. They had a whole crew with microphones, you know, and movie cameras and all this. I think that's why she was looking like this, you know. Next, more gloom. This is really. Dennis Hopper was dying of cancer, and the whole family came and to do a sort of the death of a not so virgin, and none of them talked with each other, but they all showed up for this picture, and so that was quite dramatic. Next one. Oh, well, this is the King of Spain, whom I really admire because I think he was the last true king. I mean, he inherited absolute monarchy from what's his name, the dictator, Franco, and you know, he transformed the country into a great democracy, and I really had great admiration for him. He's still around. Oh, this is Joseph Werner Reed, whom I really have great sense of humor, he was served in various positions. He was at the United Nations as an Undersecretary General for many years, what they called $1 a year man, practically a volunteer. Very respected, though. And American, really, I mean, he really was part of the great hegemony in this country. And he was famous when he was George Bush the First's chief of protocol for what was called the Talking Hat Incident, where he had a great sense of humor. He forgot to put the Queen is like Francie's size, and the tiny, and the Bush was tall, so there was nothing to stand on for the Queen, and so she addressed the whole country for the first time in decades, and no one saw her, and so he was fired. And he said, that'll be in my obituary, if not on my tombstone. And it's true, it was the lead in his obituary. But he had this idea to stand up on the dais of the Secretary General of the United Nations, you know, in his great tailoring and whatnot. It's another time. This is here just because it's beautiful. This is Argentina. It's an estancia in Argentina. And I love it down there. Oh, this is Palm Springs. And I did a big story out there. It was Bob Hope, all these characters that were still around. And but this was 1999, and they felt they were being quite brave. It seemed like a very different time. It doesn't seem so brave anymore, but with what's going on now. But they really did. They were doing something risque and making a point. It does make anyway. Next picture. This is the last one. That's it. This is I took years ago. I just love this picture because I took it in 1974 in Normandy. I don't think I ever took as good a picture as that. It's a deer hunt in Normandy. Okay. Now. Thank you. Oh, I wanted to say that if there are any things that you think don't work here, I have to do this again because I have just a dog and pony show for this book. I've never done it before, and if something doesn't work, just let me know. I always, like lose that part or just lose the whole thing.
Jonathan, thank you so much. Really a very quick tour through a small piece of your significant body of work, but right on time. And so we'd be happy to take any questions. Jonathan will be taking questions. Just in terms of the book, there is a pamphlet over here which is a description how you could in fact order the book. You can order it now. It'll be delivered October 15th, or it will start shipping October 15th. We've had the honor of going through the first copy here. Have one, which will auction for, let me start at 10,000, maybe 11,000. See, I'm getting some bids right there. And so, any questions for Jonathan? I will, if we can't hear you, I'll repeat the question if we need to. Any questions? Harry.
Jonathan, I have one. I mean, evidently this is all film, but do you shoot digital today?
So no, it's not. There are a few pictures, like the picture of Andre. I had to use the digital. I tried to make it work like film, and it does if you do it. But it's not. It has problems. For me, it has problems because the size of it. I always use 2 1/4, and they don't make 2 1/4 size. You have to. So in order to make a square, you have to abrogate the focal length and relation to the focal plane, and it's all, but it's all right. I don't have a problem with it as long as you don't monkey around with it.
Thank you.
Okay.
How do you prepare to photograph a subject? Do you research the person's background and have a bit of pitter and patter that you can talk to them about? How do you prepare?
As much as I can. It's always different. Sometimes there's a story that's been written, which I may not pay attention to, but at least I know what the. I read, and then I may know people in common if I'm lucky, or I never know, but somehow it works. If you focus, I focus on it. I focus on them. I think about the people in advance.
Francie.
Where was the deer hunt?
It was a little town called Saint-Saëns. It's strange because the mayor was a lady, the first elected female in France, 1948, I think it was. They gave the vote to women after the war in France. Before that, no. And she was first elected female. And I can't remember exactly how it came about, but she and her husband, who was a little doctor, were the best friends of my mother's parents. And they used to go on driving around Europe together, down through Venice to Capri and all this stuff. So when I was in France, I would go and visit them. And the deer hunt was run by the doctor in the town. And then that's the man who lives on Mayanes River Road, around the corner. Valles is their son, who's 80 now. Anyway, I had some kind of familial connection with that, and I used to go up there. They were big members of the resistance, and I could stay in they had a hidden room upstairs where they used to keep pilots that had been shot down, and they used to give messages about the V-2 rockets that were firing from, it was that part of Normandy, 60 kilometers from Rouen. Yeah.
Yes.
Jonathan, did you start taking the photographs because you were interested in the media photography, or was it always in your subject, so in the subject?
No, I don't know, actually. So long ago, I just can't remember because I had a Brownie. I was little, and then I kept getting a little bit of a better camera, and it was always the subjects, yeah. But I started also to figure, as I had to get a job, when I was 12, because they used to send me up here to Maine to camp in the summer, 2 months, that was it. But when I came back when I was 12 and there was no camp, my father said, you have to get a job. So I got a job in a restaurant as a busboy. There's a big restaurant out there called Herb McCarthy's Bowden Square. I remember it. It was horrible. Everybody went there, but it was a slop house. I couldn't believe how filthy the kitchens were and all these things I had to do. And you really see it as a busboy. You see what's going on in a restaurant. I thought, I'll never eat in a restaurant again in my life, never. And I tell my father, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to build a little darkroom, and I'm going to commission myself to do portraits of the kids around Southampton. That was my first job, and it did. I mean, they commissioned me. I mean, I got there, and then the next summer, I had a Rolleiflex. I'd taken up the Rolleiflex. I guess it was 13, almost 14, and I went to the fairgrounds where they had, Ferris wheels, and the kids were all on rides. And I did the pictures of the kids on the rides because I knew them all, and then I got it all done at once, and it was great. I just always did it. What can I tell you? And it kept me out of being a busboy. Yeah.
We take one more question, and then we'll close it out for the evening. Gail.
This is more of a comment than a question. I was once at a small party where Peter Beard was present. I thought he was a very dashing, romantic figure. If I had known what his feet looked like, I would have lost interest.
His hands were pretty gnarly, too.
There was one more question? Yeah.
I just want to ask specifically about the picture for Vanity Fair, Prince Charles and the Camilla.
Yeah.
Is that lady died next to him?
No. He's sitting next to Lily Safra. No. She was long gone. This was in around 1999 or 2000, something like that. When did she die, Diana? Long before.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over to Gail.
Okay. Jonathan, this exceeded expectations by many, many miles. This is one of Islesborough's human treasures. And we are so fortunate to have coaxed him out of his comparatively remote, reclusive shell. We might ask him back, what do you think, when his book comes out? So this is our last program, and I hope that you have found as much pleasure, interest, and stimulation in the programs as we have in putting them on for you. It's been an absolute pleasure and delight to put the summer series together. I do want to thank the other members of my committee, and they include Bruce Claflin, Helen Elkins, Peter Rothschild, Leslie Glotzel, Nina Herrick, I think I have all of them, and John Rexwaller, who sadly is going to leave the committee of his own volition. We didn't kick him off, but we're very grateful for the wonderful speakers that he brought to our attention and facilitated for us. Special thanks to our technical producer, Jeff Glutzel, who's wandering around in the back. He has been an absolute pleasure and delight to work with, so thank you, Jeff. I think that probably completes the program. I'll just...
We should thank Gail for organizing. It was a little like herding cats.
Well, I'm going to try to herd the cats. On Tuesday, we have a meeting of the committee, and we'll begin thinking and talking about next year. So come back and see us then. Thank you very much.